Amigoch, for that welcoming song. We are now going to have a honor song, I believe. As soon as the River Cree singers catch their breath and have a sip of water. So what we're going to have now is they're going to honor the chiefs with a chief song. Raj. Thank you very much. River Cree singers from Enoch Cree Nation. Welcome, everybody. We are coming to you live on the World Wide Web. We are posted up in Edmonton, Treaty 6 territory, for the Assembly of First Nations 4 Policies and Nation Building Forum. And you'll hear me say that a lot throughout the 2 days. This is, in fact, a forum. It is not an annual General Assembly. It is not a Special Chiefs Assembly. It is a forum. And for those of you who are new to the AFN processes, the Chiefs in Assembly, the Special Chiefs Assemblies, you need to be a representative of your nation to be able to address the delegation. But at this forum, everybody is lending their voice to this. It is wide open. Thank you for those words, National Chief. I'd like to call up Elder Mike Mitchell, who's the resident elder for the Assembly of First Nations. We did have a pipe ceremony this morning. Pipes were raised, the prayers were said. So this actually started about 2 hours ago now. Our elders sat and smoked the pipe. So I'll ask resident Assembly of First Nations Elder Mike Mitchell to come and address this forum. Which Mike?
Teg. Wagatsanuni wan kungaru amdage. Tukaran you wanage. Aguarori, Genio. You take your hagi and what you want soon. Ganya Angweno hagi. Then another day, what the Hejoni, Unayawa. Jinugi wa take you. Negati Noah when he's a rade. Mdoya Daroroge. Scotty Gura, he was wished on do. Can I do a year at I said in my own language, greetings to everyone. And this morning, the elders convened a ceremony. And in that ceremony was a greeting from Mother Earth. All the rivers, trees, animal life, to the 2 sons, Grandmother Moon and Elder Brother's son, beyond the heavens. And they also asked for all the people, indigenous people, that we have an opportunity to share with one another in a good way, in peace. Because there's a lot of things happening all over the world. People are not living in peace. They come this close, wars all over. In the United States, there's a lot of hostility, a lot of racist things going on against minority. And we sense a lot of that is starting to happen in Canada. And so, as it pertains to Oklahoma people, we can't afford to be divided amongst ourselves and not speak to one another. So in our ceremony this morning, tobacco was offered, asking the Creator and the Spirit guides to give everyone the strength to see each other as brothers and sisters. There's a lot of things that have happened in our history. Our relations with the Crown. For us, as Haudenosaunee Iroquois, one of the first treaties that was made is called the Two-Row Wampum. It was made with one of the first settlers in North America, the Dutch. And they wanted to coexist. But the way they phrased it, they said, we'll be like your teachers for the life that we brought. And you'll be like our children. You'll be the students. And the Haudenosaunee leaders listened. And after it was all done, they said, we can't have a relationship like that. We can't have a father-son relationship because a father can order his son around. However, we'll be brothers. And so they reminded them, your people came here on a ship. You came here to enjoy your religion, your way of life that you couldn't in the land you were in. And so we give you that. In your ship, you can have your governance, your religion, your way of life. But we also have our canoe, and in our canoe, we'll have the same. And we'll go down the river of life together. In time of need, we'll come and help you. Life was rough and tough for Europeans to settle in Turtle Island. So at that time, our people gave them space of land to live. Treaties followed, but it was always on the premise that we are brothers, equal. Later, the English came, what they called the English crown. And they said, the king will be your father. You'll all be his children. For some reason, Europeans always think like that. And again, they reminded them of a treaty they made with the Dutch. They said it's going to carry over. And so with the English, they made the same pact, same understanding, that they be like two brothers. And they went through the same thing about what's in a ship and what's in a canoe. But they also added to that silver covenant chain. And in that they said, we will be allies to one another. For the different wars that you are involved in, for us, between us, we will always be brothers. Sharing this land and its resources, the English promised, they said, we'll have annual presents yearly, and we'll meet. And so the wars that followed after that with the French, with the Americans, and what became Canada, was all based on that notion of nationhood. They recognize us as nations. They recognize us as having the authority. Many of those treaty councils say that. So today, we're having discussions in our communities because we're no longer nation to nation. We're no longer brothers in that sense of equals. They have taken over this country and have been at it for the last 2 centuries. But there's still treaty relationship. And so those are the things we have to keep in mind in our relationship with the Crown. Our ancestors sat down, negotiated treaty. And that treaty relationship, when they created the Indian Act and put us on these small pieces of land, they were words of promise, of commitment. They were treaty promises. When they said annual presents every year, that's what they were talking about. So today, we sit amongst one another, trying to figure out what is going to be the future relationship we want to get out of the white man's ship and back into our own canoe. Meaning we want to get out of the Indian Act. But we've been in it for so long that our people no longer understand why we must get out. We call the Band Council chiefs Indian Act chiefs, as if it was a dirty word. Really important for us to recognize we're not the enemies to each other. The only way we'll progress moving forward is to understand that relationship. What is it really based on? And go from there. When you sit down and negotiate self-government with Canada, you always have to stand on the principle that you are part of a nation. You have nation standing, no matter how small you are. And within that nation, you have your language, you have your governance, you have your culture, you have your way of life. And they've done everything to take it away from us, through residential school, through church, everything. But somehow we have survived. And the last thing we must deal with, and there's not too many examples anywhere that we can point to of indigenous peoples that have gotten out of the Indian Act. And so on one hand, we say we want to get out. The government comes along and says, okay, let's do it. But at the same time, you will become Canadian citizens. We'll have that relationship and we say, hold it. We want to stand on the principle that we are a nation still. So the only thing that we bicker about is what type of self-government are we going to have? The last thing that remains to be done and to be seen is that we report to our own people, our own nation people. We don't report any longer to the Indian agent in Ottawa, to Indian Affairs. That's the most significant thing that needs to happen. Now, we have a treaty with a Western tribe, us and Akwesasne in the east. They're from West Bank. They negotiated and got out of the Indian Act already 50-some years ago. But it took the better part of 3 years of intensive meetings with their community people. They invited some of us to come and answer questions, how we are moving about to address this area of self-government. And what does nation building mean? They brought other speakers, other leaders from about the country, and individually, we all contributed to the discussion, just so people know what goes on with other First Nations. 3 years, they finally voted. But the self-government model that they came up with, the power lies with the people. The direction is provided and decided by the people in that First Nation. It wasn't a hard issue to determine. Some 10 years later, I got invited back. And my first impulse was to ask people who were from the community, like here, what did you think? Do some of you want to get back into the Indian Act? 100% said, no way. You see, they made that bold step, knowing there's nobody else that has done this that they can see. They talk to others who have become very close to getting out or how they're solidifying, building a nation. And that's what we have to discuss. What is that relationship going to be? What is going to be the relationship going into the future with Ottawa? What type of pledge, what type of commitment is there for us to take care of our people? As we go around having these discussions, we're going to have to really care of our approach. We can't dive in and let Ottawa come and say, we're going to do it this way. That's what our people are scared about, that they'll continue to dominate us. Remember that first treaty I talked about earlier, when they said we'll be brothers, we'll be equals. Everything we do has to have that in mind. From the smallest, your people will continue to say, we're not wards of the government. We are allies. Because Canada got built on the backs of the Indian nations who once owned all of this land and its resources. And so everything that we do from here on has to have that in mind. Now, we may disagree on the approach because for some, they say the self-government ideas that Canada provides is going to work for us. Well, that's fine. If you feel that that's one way you can establish that, there's going to be various types of self-government that people are going to go through and say, this will work for me. But there'll be others. As we talk more, you begin to realize, I do belong to a nation. And my past leaders negotiated a treaty. So we have a treaty relations. And even the ones who don't have a treaty, your ancestors, when they were in control, they had a relationship with the Crown. There were proclamations of promise made by the Crown. And that's what we have to live by and build that, put that back in our canoe. So brothers and sisters, in our discussions, when we look to our leaders and say, you're just an Indian Act chief, no power. You know, in a sense, they're right. Don't take it as negative. Because after a long journey of 200 and some years, wearing that Indian Act chief headdress and authority, we want to take it back out and build into a nation building a process where you are now working for your people, for your community, for your nation, and there are ties to each other. That's really what it's all about. How we view and recognize ourselves. And so these discussions about not having the type of authority as we go forward into the future, it's not rocket science. We need to pick back up what is ours. And that's from our culture, our language, our ceremonies that we had. Don't be ashamed of it anymore. Because through residential school and teachings from the outside, we've become ashamed of our own culture, teachings. And that's part of the gap that we have now in our thinking. Because those are what determines who we are. Our nations have very diverse and rich cultures, and we have to rebuild that back up. So this week, in the next few days, we're going to have intensive discussions. We're going to hear from everyone. Let us treat each other with great respect because we need to share. We need to share all the concerns that we have, all the fears that we have. And going forward, this is not a regular AFN meeting. This is a meeting of just us sitting down, trying to determine as we go forward, what is it, the premise of nationhood is our foundation. And how do we translate that into our governance going forward? What is Canada offering? We all need to listen and determine whether that's the direction we want to go. It's not late, but we must do it through education with one another. Sharing the concerns and progress, best case scenario, and the warmth of brotherhood will produce a good meeting for the next few days. Yamakoa.
Miigwech. Elder Mike Mitchell, thank you for that. I have territorial welcome coming from Chief Calvin Bruno. Calvin Bruno. Pretty sure that's what I said. Papa Chase First Nation, welcoming us to his traditional territory. Chief.
Thank you, thank you. I'd just like to start out with a song. Hi, how are you? Hi, how are you? Yeah. It's getting too quiet in here, too serious. But I just want to just welcome everybody into Treaty 6 territory, Papa Chase territory. I'd just like to honor and thank the elders for their prayers this morning, the drummers, singers, and just like to welcome the chiefs, delegates, and to our beautiful city here. And just give a little bit of background, I'm the direct descendant of Chief Papa Chase, who signed Treaty 6 here at Fort Edmonton. And so I've been chief for the last 8 years now in my second term. And so I just feel it's an honor to be here, to be asked by the AFN to welcome you into our traditional lands and territory. And so we were, back in December, acknowledged and recognized as a nation by the Assembly of First Nations, and I want to thank you for that. It's been a long, hard struggle, and it still continues to be, but it's gotten a lot easier. And just want to say, let's enjoy our city. We got a lot of good things happening here. River Cree, one of them, check that out. We have a lot of restaurants. We have a lot of West Edmonton Mall, of course. If you got spas as well. Get yourself a manicure, pedicure. Your feet will love it so much they'll want to come back here again. So anyway, just enjoy your time here. Let's have some good positive discussions. Let's move forward together to work for a better future for our people. Hi.
We got Chief. Now I'd like to call on Alberta Regional Chief, Marilyn Portress. Regional Chief.
Ooh, but sun is bright. Danse te tamskatna o kakio. Nigan nustawino nanaskamo and nuskisagao samino migoya. Good morning, everyone. And what I said was I thank the Creator for this beautiful day and for bringing us all here together. I want to say thank you to Chief Calvin Bruno for your welcome, your traditional welcome. And I just want to say a big thank you to the River Cree drummers for the great job this morning. And I want to thank also the Louisville Elder Ivy Rain and Elder John Cryer for the pipe ceremonies this morning, which, the ceremonies are very important for grounding us and to the Creator and reminding us that we are all connected. And I've been told oftentimes that the pipe is our constitution. We are guided by natural law. We are blessed to have our elders that are passing down that knowledge and teaching a new generation away of our peoples. I would like to welcome chiefs, members of council, elders, women, youth, and community members to the Treaty 6, Treaty 7, and Treaty 8 Alberta First Nations territory. I would also like to welcome the National Chief and the AFN staff to our region. I have found that when leaders gather, it's important to be reminded of guiding principles and values that guide important discussions. The pipe ceremonies play an important role to establish these principles and to ground us. Our leaders have always followed these respectful principles and protocols when engaging with other nations, and it's been the practice from time immemorial, from even with our ancestors. This policy forum is intended to provide an opportunity to participants to discuss the barriers First Nations face in implementing their treaty rights, inherent rights, title, and jurisdiction, and to provide an opportunity to discuss the tools that are needed to implement and enforce jurisdiction. That is very important. Chiefs have not had the time to have these discussions, and this is what this forum is going to do, is for you to have those discussions and more time. And I know, when we're at our AFN assemblies, time is very limited because of the jam-packed agenda. So we've allowed more time for discussions here, and hopefully, to come to some fruitful resolutions and how we can move forward collectively. The Prime Minister has stated that they're moving away from the approach of extinguishment of rights. However, the rights and recognitions process excluded First Nations from the drafting. The Chiefs Committee on Lands, Territories, and Resources have been tasked with following up on the directives provided by resolution from the Chiefs with regard to the 4 policies that we'll be discussing today. As a regional chief and co-chair, and I want to acknowledge my co-chair, Chief Wilfred King from Ontario. Thank you for being here. And we're the co-chairs of the Chiefs Committee on Lands, Territories, and Resources. I have raised concerns about the sectoral and self-government tables that are operating outside of current policies. We have no idea what precedents they're establishing. We have been advised that the bar that First Nations are setting at these exploratory tables are setting the standard for a rights and recognition policy. Yesterday, for the first time, we met with Joe Wild. He confirmed that he has only been meeting with First Nations who have expressed interest in initiating a table discussion specific to their issues and concerns. And this process he characterized as co-development. Everything that is co-developed at these tables has to go to cabinet for approval. He stated that they want to get they want to repeal the comprehensive claims and inherent rights policy and replace them with high-level guidelines for negotiators that considers the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So I just want to update you on some of the key points that we raised in our meeting with Joe Wild. Self-government and comprehensive claims policies must be consistent with UNDRIP and the Organization of American States Declaration. They must be mutually agreed upon there must be a co-development approach to policy changes. The June 2019 deadline is unacceptable to announce a new policy. The federal government cannot claim co-development since it has excluded those First Nations who have not agreed to negotiate under the self-government and comprehensive claims policies. There needs to be transparency in Canada's policy replacement processes. The public perception, and Canada have said that reconciliation and co-development are occurring, but in reality it's not. They need to address the process on the placemat issues that Joe Wild provided in terms of a process to have some policies in place by June, and which their placement was rejected by the AFN, and AFN has countered that any process going forward has to be First Nations led. And I also reminded him that he has to honor our treaties, which are entrenched in Canada's Constitution. And since those treaties were agreed to, over 100 years ago, there hasn't been any progress on the treaties, and that has to be a priority of the government moving forward, and they need to have those discussions with the rights holders because, as we all know, AFN is not a rights and title holder, but we do advocate, we do lobby government, and any of the issues that First Nations want us to move forward, we do that. And and we'll continue to do that. Our current mandate is to reject the current policies and to advocate for a First Nations-led process. So this forum is an opportunity for you to have dialogue, but you'll also have an opportunity to hear from Joe Wild, who will be here later today, and Minister Carolyn Bennett, who will be here tomorrow. So they need to hear from you directly, but it's also important for us, as treaty people, as people with modern treaties, pre-Confederation treaties, that we develop our own processes. We develop our nations and ensure that we establish protocols that the government must follow, and that we assert our sovereignty and jurisdiction. So I'm a treaty person. My grandfather signed adhesion to Treaty Number 8, and I'm from the Mikisew Cree First Nation. Any recognition of rights must give force to the spirit and intent and First Nations understanding of treaty and respect the many diverse First Nations here today, pre-Confederation, modern treaty, and numbered treaties. So we have in common our understanding of our inherent rights, our culture, our language, our connections to the land. We have strong roots, and these roots are growing. We strive to work together in unity, and together we are stronger. So let's keep working together, and I believe that the more we work together, the harder it is for the government to deny what it is that we want to ensure that is in place as we move forward. So thank you very much. Hi.
Miigwech Regional Chief, thank you very much. I'd like to call up Dr. Paulette Tremblay, CEO of the Assembly of First Nations.
Sago Scano, good morning. Wow, I don't get usually an opportunity to share perspectives and to say a few words, but I'm glad I do today. I want to acknowledge that we're on Treaty 6 with Treaty 678 people here. It's a beautiful space. We even got to the Edmonton Mall yesterday and took pictures of the seals and the skating rink after we saw the snow keep falling. So it was quite astounding. Here we are, May 1, still snowing. That's kind of cool, I think. I want to thank the elders, Ivy Rain and John Cryer this morning. Wonderful, wonderful pipe ceremony. It filled my heart. I love ceremony. I'm just learning about it. When I grew up on my dad's reserve, I'm Mohawk from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. It's my mom's community. And my dad's community is Bay of Quinte Mohawks, Tyendinaga. And we gave thanks for everything. And I think that as I'm growing up, and we didn't have ceremony because we had superintendents in our communities. And so my grandparents and my extended family wouldn't teach me Mohawk because they were afraid that we would be punished. And it's a loss, a major loss, trying to learn the language as you get older. But I'm being encouraged. It's time. And I have a granddaughter, Alexis, who's just turned 8 on the weekend. And she says, Dura, Kukum, Nana, why don't you speak your language? We're Mohawk. I want you to teach me. And, so she says, you can do it. We'll just learn each day. And she puts her little hands on my tail. We can do it. And I thought, we have to do it. We have to do it day by day. and just a word a week. So we got this program that Mike Mitchell and his community gave me, this learning program. I'm so proud of it. So I'm learning my language. It's not easy, but I'm committed. And we're going to do it together because she wants to be a Mohawk, and she's not on reserve. So there's a separation. So I have to make sure, if I'm going to grow her up to be who we are, then we have to step up. We have to work together. And so I thank the elders for bringing me ceremony. And I want to thank our national chief for bringing us ceremony, because he's a pipe carrier, and he brings ceremony to everything he does at the Assembly First Nations. We have 2 feasts a year, and it makes a difference in the organization. I've got staff who love being at the Assembly of First Nations. They care about you. They care about our children. They care about our grandchildren. And they do the long, extended hours with very little thanks because they love their people. Because they want to make sure their lives for their children and their grandchildren aren't the way they are today. And so we have a really nice space where we work together, and we care about each other, and we love each other, because that's our way. That's who we are. And so I want to thank the elders, because they gave me hope and sunshine today, although we're getting it electronically too. Oh, I want to thank Chief Bruno and Regional Chief Poitras. They're wonderful leaders. I know Regional Chief Poitras works very hard at the Assembly First Nations and gives her heart and soul. We're so pleased that she's on our executive, bringing that female energy, that equity for having equality in terms of male-female energy, because we need both. We need us to be energized and focused, and women bring a different energy. It's just the way it is. And so I want to thank them for being leaders in a tough time. I want to welcome all the elders here, the chiefs, and all the delegates to the National Forum. As a Mohawk growing up on reserve, I can relate to the connectedness, because we were spiritualists. We were people who believed that everything was connected, everything had meaning, and it was very important to give thanks to the Creator and to the animals who gave up, who were living according to their instructions and gave up their lives so that we could have sustenance. And so we believe that we're all part of everything. We're not alone here. And that's what I said to my little girl, Lexi. I said, you know, everything has a spirit. We have to go out and give thanks for it. It's not just, all my relations aren't just people. It's not about just that. It's about the spirit, the seen, unseen. And so I said, and you have to go out and talk to the birds and the animals and to the trees and hug that tree. And so we were out the other day, and she says, Dada, look at that bird. What is he saying? He's singing this song. I said, oh, he's so happy to see you, my girl. He's here. We should be thankful that he wants to share good feelings and good energy with us. And so she says, okay, I like that message. She said, I'm going to listen more carefully. And that she gets part of her spirit. See, it's the small things. It's the little things that we can do to care and show who we are. And I think that we do carry who we are inside us. And living in harmony and peace and unity is important. 2 other things that were important from my clan mothers, they've been saying this to me forever. And that is, you have to, everything has its time. When it's time, it will happen. And you can't change or rush it or make things happen if it's not time. And so I think if we acknowledge this is the time now of reconciliation, this is the time where we're supposed to work together, work jointly, work as a unified body as First Nations peoples. And I think that it's time. It's our time. It's our time to say who we are. It's our time to say what we want. It's our time to tell people how we were treated and how we felt about it. And it's our time to make sure that we are in that canoe and we're actualizing all of the things that were given to us by the Creator. And that is language, that is culture, that is tradition. And so I see that happening at our Assembly of First Nations. And I give thanks because I'm going into my 4th year at the Assembly of First Nations. This is my 2nd time. I was there about 30 years ago. I never ever dreamed that I would be back, but I am. I know that another teaching from our elders, my clan mothers, was saying that it's your duty to share your gifts. Everybody has a gift, and it's your job, if you're asked to share the gifts that you have, that you must step up. It's your duty, it's your obligation. And so when I was asked to come back, I thought about that, and I thought, my mom's talking to me. She's with the Creator now, she's home, but I dream about her. And I look outside, and I thought, she used to call me every day, have you gone outside? Have you breathed in nature? Have you breathed in who you are? Have you connected? And I say, yes. So the person of this forum, purpose, is to gather and share information. It's about our experiencing relating to First Nations rights and our title and our jurisdiction and treaties. And yes, AFN knows we are not a treaty holder. We know we're not a government. We know that we work for the chiefs. We're servants to the chiefs in assembly. And we get our direction from the chiefs in assembly. And we get that direction through what we call resolutions. We have a ton of resolutions. They're on the website. So if you want to know what we're mandated to work on, you can check it out. And I have to tell you, we have lots of resolutions in relationship to the 4 policies and in relationship to the rights-based agenda and the United Nations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and these 4 policies that we are here to talk about today: inherent rights, comprehensive claims, specific claims, additions to reserves, nation building. We have resolutions to do this work, and we follow them to the letter, because my job, my duty, is to ensure that we stay on track and we do what we're mandated to do. And I make sure that we do. And the first question I ask is, if we're working on something, I say, hold it, do we have a resolution on this from the chiefs that gave us the mandate to do this work? Because we're servants to the chief. We serve the chiefs. And there are only 2 decision-making bodies that are in existence right now, and that's the Chiefs in Assembly and the Executive Committee. That's important, and we know it, and we know that this is not that type of place. This is a place where we get to come and dialogue. We get to share our views. We get to open up. We get to let people see who we are and understand what's going on. And so I'm not going to talk about the specifics of the 4 policies and nation building, because you're going to learn about AFN's approach to this, what we've done, what we've discussed, what we said, what we haven't said, from our perspective. And you get to ask questions. And then you get to hear from what the government, the Crown, says, because they're going to be here saying what they think. And we don't match. We have not bought in, because we were told to reject. And it's in this resolution 67-2018. We reject the proposed recognition and implementation of Indigenous rights framework, and we reject the principles, the 10 federal government principles. We reject all of that. And we acknowledge that First Nations exclusively exercise their inherent rights without interference and are free to determine their own path to self-determination. We are saying to them that we can't work in co-development if this is your approach. This is your placemat, this is your approach, not ours. And we reject that approach, and there is no policy to be completed by June. There's no interim policy. We didn't agree to that. We reject that. And we have our own way to move forward. And part of that was, as we stated in this resolution, that we're going to call AFN to hold a forum for purpose of looking at these issues And that's what we're doing. And we hope to hear lots. There will be no decisions made today, no resolutions passed. This is not a Chiefs Committee. Executive Committee, 3 members here. But we're here for honest, open dialogue, and sometimes we know we're not going to agree, and that's okay. We don't have to agree, but we have to listen to each other with open hearts, good minds, and care about what you have to say. This is your opportunity, and we're really interested in hearing because we want to hear what people are saying, and we'll bring the report to the annual General Assembly in July, where we do have our decision makers, and we can present ideas. And so I want to say Nyagoa, and thank you for allowing me to say a few words, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful 2 days. Nyawe.
Chimiigwech. Paulette, thank you very much for those words, sharing your perspective. I'd like to call up Elder Ivy Rain. Elder Ivy Rain is going to be giving remarks as well.
Good morning. Kakiok tatamskat na ano sa kiksepa. Imyo kiska kasam nakta kiska habikosya tos kawito tamak. Kinanas kumt na ka kiota pe witap mae ko kuta kan kampaita tsako mama opon. I want to thank every one of you. I thank the Creator for bringing us here this morning. I imagine you'll be here for the 2 days, and it was a pleasure and a humbling pleasure to do the pipe ceremony this morning so that everything would go well at this gathering. And I understand that there are going to be some people coming in a while to come and meet with the organizers, or I don't know, someone. And I would ask that you pray that everything will work out in their conversations with the representatives here. Because we don't need dissension in our organizations. We need peace, that harmony among all nations. I know EFN is working their best with the chiefs. They don't control the chiefs. They're like Paulette said, they work for the chiefs. So pray that everything will turn out good this morning when people come and confront the AFN. And I'm glad to see that all of you are here. And I don't know how much else to say because I'm not a politician. I don't know how to make presentations. I don't know how to do public speaking. But I thank you all for being here today and for the these 2 days. And I know that the Creator is blessing your home fires, that you will return to them safely, and that your travels will be kept safe, whether you're flying or driving. And I thank you all for listening, and Lord bless you all. Hi, hi.
Miigwech, thank you very much. Now I'd like to call up National Chief Perry Bellegarde, giving an address to this forum.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you, Ivy, for those good words. Kanaskomtin. Ista nenaskomon kakiano temtik no akumagna. Kanaskomtinawa ka kiao kiteyak. Okimawak iskoyak napayak. No tainans man to kanaskomtin. Nista kuskateo maskusis oskunnigan utsinia. and Treaty 4 territory, and a little bit in Nakota. Humetakiapi Pinamayo, Tukanshla Pinamayo. We're Cree Nakota back home on Little Black Bear. And I thank you all for being here, and just some comments of acknowledgement as well for the elders and their pipe ceremony this morning, to John Cryer and Ivy Rain. It's always good to start off in a good way with ceremony and lifting the pipes. And a good reminder as well that it wasn't only about this gathering on the 4 policies, comprehensive claims, the inherent right to self-government, additions to reserve, and as well the spec claims. But we're talking about nation building. But as well, she reminded us, don't forget treaty. And we're treaty people. And I always have my treaty medallion, that speaks to our relationship with the crown, that speaks to, as long as the sun shines and the rivers flow and the grass grows, that this treaty will remain in effect nation to nation. And so it was a good reminder that there wasn't just a shaking of hands, but it was also a covenant, a sacred covenant, because it was done through the pipe, it was done through ceremony. So I really want to thank you for those good words this morning in prayers on what we're here to do. So as well, to acknowledge the Treaty 6 territory, and Chief Calvin Bruno, Papa's Chase, for the welcome, your ancestral territory, your lands here, your treaty lands, your First Nations lands here as a Treaty 6 signer. So thank you for that. And as well, acknowledge Grand Chief Willie Littlechild from Treaty 6, and as well Grand Chief from Treaty 8, Arthur Noski, and my colleague on the executive, Chief Patra, for your good, strong leadership and your good balance in your words and all your good work you do there. Treaty 7 is here as well, the Blackfoot and the Nakotas, the Stonies, and Tsuut'ina, just outside Calgary. So the Treaty 7 peoples, Treaty 6, 7, and 8, Alberta. And so this morning, friends and relatives, just to kind of set the background and the context, why we're here, May 1 and 2. And it's a meeting of chiefs. There's a number of chiefs here, but it's citizens of our nations and tribes as well. And to come together to talk about those 4 policies. And then how do we collectively move beyond the Indian Act? Because that's been here since 1876. And I have a presentation to make in terms of just 2 slides I said I'm going to use to kind of give the background as we lead up to these 4 policies. In our Assembly of First Nations, when I look at it, we say is on the bottom. It's not on the top. But when we start talking about nations, and we start talking about one of the most important rights we have is the right to self-determination. And so the clickers over here, they're going to put up the first slide. But as First Nations people, Indigenous peoples, one of the most important rights, and that's my little timeline that I always use. And I'm going to spend some time, go past, present, future, chiefs. And to the citizens here, just to show things that we begin from as Indigenous peoples. And I always start with the doctrines of discovery and doctrines of terra nullius. Always start there. And I always encourage chiefs and people to use these words: assumed crown sovereignty, assumed crown jurisdiction. Even our tiny little Indian reservations. Well, some of our reservations are tiny. I always looked at the Bloods and the Blackfoots. How did you guys get that great big reserve over there? 100 miles by 100 miles. And little Black Bear's 4 miles by 9 miles. Of course, the Blackfoots are Blackfoot brothers. Says, well, we're better negotiators. No. But we got huge reserve lands. Treaty 7 territory. But we say, are they really federal crown lands set aside for the use and benefit of Indians? Our reservations? Because that's what it is in Muniao and white man law. That's what they call it. That our reserve lands are federal crown lands set aside for the use and benefit of Indians. And we say, really? Well, how did the crown gain title to our lands and territories and resources? They use those 2 things, the doctrine of discovery and doctrine of terra nullius. And so those 2 doctrines are fast becoming seen as illegal racist doctrines, not only in Canada, but throughout the world. So we have to begin with that mindset. Begin there with those 2 doctrines. And so then we start thinking about this nationhood and sovereignty and jurisdiction. But then this thing comes along in 1763, this Royal Proclamation. Very important tool. And people talk about, we need a new Royal Proclamation. I would say, well, what's wrong with the old one? The old one recognizes, and the Crown recognized First Nations title to land and territories. And this is important because these are all constitutional documents, very high up things. But it's our relationship with the Crown. And we've always said as First Nations people, we're allies of the Crown. And we use these words, honor of the Crown. There's a federal fiduciary trust responsibility because of the Crown obligations to Indian people, First Nations people. But the Royal Proclamation, it's an important piece. And that forms part of Canada's current constitution, 1763. The Crown recognized our title and jurisdiction to land and territories. Then I threw this thing in there, 1867 British North America Act, Section 9124. It says the federal government is responsible for Indians and Indian lands. It doesn't say Indians on Indian lands. It says Indians and Indian lands. A further recognition by that Crown about our title and jurisdiction to territories and lands. That's important. And then again, who is responsible for Indian people? First Nations people. Then you heard recently about that big court case. You know, the Métis people, our brothers and sisters, are now under the Daniels case, that they fall under Section 9124 now, because historically they were all under the provincial governments. They were the football. Who's responsible for them? Provincial governments or federal governments? The Daniels case came down, Section 9124. Federal government's responsible for Indians and Indian lands. It's important. It's a British North America Act. And that's what governed Canada right up until 1982. Canada was a colony of Great Britain right up until 1982. So the BNA Act, the British North America Act, very important. And it outlined as well the difference in the powers between the federal government and their provincial governments. They outlined powers. Federal government's responsible for this, provincial government's responsible for this, but they forgot about First Nations governments and didn't recognize our jurisdiction. They didn't recognize or respect or respond or look after or even see that there were other governments here way before 1763. That's what they forgot. But since this timeline, the 1867, the British North America Act, and then I go to this 1870 Order in Council, and I put that in there because nobody talks about that enough. It's another piece of Canada's Constitution. And it basically says when lands are taken up for settlement, it says the Aborigines are supposed to be compensated on a fair and equitable basis. It doesn't say Indians, it says Aborigines. But the principle, when lands are taken up for settlement, the Indigenous peoples are supposed to be compensated on a fair and equitable basis. It's an important piece, the 1870 Order in Council. Very important. And then we put in the number treaties. And I made this apply to myself as a member of Little Black Bear, but apply to yourself, because there's many kind of treaties in Canada. There's the pre-Confederation treaties, the Mi'kmaq Treaty, Maliseet in the 1700s, treaties with the Dutch. Elder Mike talked about the Truro Wampum Treaty, which speaks clearly to jurisdiction, our own laws and custom traditions in one canoe. Going down this river of life, our Muniau brothers and sisters, another laws and customs, but not supposed to interfere. Truro Wampum, pre-Confederation treaties. You have the Robinson-Huron treaties, and a big victory there regarding annuities. They used to get $2 a year for annuities, went up to $4 in 1874, didn't go up anymore, but yet all the land and resources were taken from their ancestral territories, and they recently won that their annuities are supposed to keep up with all the land and resources that were extracted from their lands. That's a big victory. Robinson-Huron treaties. That's big. We lift them up and thank them for that. So these treaties, in the 1870s, Canada was a colony of Great Britain. And then in the number treaties, and we're in Treaty 6 territory. I'm from Treaty 4. But this treaty medallion, the chiefs were given silver medallions. 4 bronze ones for the 4 headmen. Chiefs' uniforms. I don't see the treaty chief suits too often now. Chief Bernice wears hers from Treaty 6. Very strong and powerful, Chief Bernice. Thank you for that. From Cold Lake, Chief Marshal. She wears that. high up authority, the chiefs. And remember this office of chief and council are high up, because I'm going to come when we come to nation building, my next slide after. But because of that most important right we have, the inherent right to self-determination, and I always say this, because we have those 5 elements, and we might be over 1 million people in Canada, like 4.5% of Canada's population, but we're not ethnic minorities. We are Indigenous peoples with the inherent right to self-determination because of our own land, our own laws, our own languages, our own people, and our own identifiable forms of government. A different jurisdiction. We're not creatures of the provinces. We're not creatures like municipalities. We're not creatures of the federal government. We're entities unto ourselves. And because of that right, our chiefs entered into a treaty with the Crown. I never say signed it, signed treaty. Our chiefs didn't understand English or French. They spoke Cree and Assiniboine and Ojibwe and Saulteaux and Dene and Blackfoot, different tribes. They didn't speak English or French. Had to go through an interpreter. So that in the numbered treaties, there's a line. Cede, surrender, and relinquish, title to the crown and the crown's heirs and successors forever. Those words. I don't believe little Black Bear understood those words either. But our elders would always say depth of a plow. We'll share the depth of a plow with the white people and the white people coming to our lands and territories. Nothing below the depth of a plow. So we still have unextinguished Aboriginal title and rights to the resources beneath the depth of a plow, based on our understanding as treaty people. And that has never been dealt with. The depth of a plow. In the 1870s, the treaties, treaty-making process. And J.J. Curran said this, and he was the Solicitor General of Canada in 1897, that these treaties are governed by international law, not domestic, and they're international in nature. So there is a high up reverence for the Crown. Why do we see the Union Jack at Treaty Day? Because that was the flag that was flying. That was the flag that was promised to flutter in the wind forever for us, to recognize that relationship with the Crown. Always, that relationship with the Crown is high up. And even when Prince Charles was here a couple of years ago, I had on my medallion and I said, this is your kokum, this is your grandma, Queen Victoria. I was explaining the medallion to him. And this was a covenant. The hatchet is buried. As long as that sun shines and the rivers flow and the grass grows, this treaty will remain in effect. Peace between our peoples, peaceful coexistence and respect between our peoples. And I told him that's why we pray. We have ceremonies and pray about the monarchy. A great reverence, because that's our relationship with the Crown and right of Great Britain. And I was explaining all of this to him, and I said, you know, we want to bring back some treaty chiefs at some point to meet with you and your mom, because it's our relationship, treaty implementation. He leans over to me and goes, Chief, it's a splendid idea. I said, so we got to follow up with the Crown. And whether it's the Silver Covenant chain, with the Ungwahoi Mohawk peoples, you know, with that Silver Covenant chain, there's a crown at the end. And we're supposed to hang on to that. So that's the international nature of the treaties. But these treaties, just the clauses in our treaties, when you're ready to settle down on the reserves, we'll provide a little red brick schoolhouse and teach your children the cunning of the white man. Education. Treaty 6, the house of the Indian agent will keep a medicine chest clause. In times of sickness and pestilence and famine, we will look after your peoples. Continue your avocation of hunting, fishing, and trapping. We don't want your animals. We'll look after the animals for you, the moose, the elk, the deer, all those things. All these things were promised under treaty. Freedom from military conscription in Treaty 8. We assured the Indian people they would not be subject to military conscription or come fight the Queen's wars. All of these things were promised via the treaty commissioner, Alexander Morris. $25 for chiefs, $15 for headmen, and $5 for every man, woman, and child. May, June, July is treaty days. Treaty days. Wow. Our young people say, don't even want to go to treaty, can't even buy a pack of smokes with $5 anymore. That's what they say. So that spirit and intent, though, of all those clauses, that spirit and intent to education, the spirit and intent to health care, in exchange for sharing the depth of a plow with these newcomers here, we're supposed to have these treaty rights respected, honored, and implemented. So the treaties are very important, high up international treaties. And then along comes this thing in 1876, the Indian Act. That Indian Act is still here in 2019. It's not a treaty implementation act, it's an Indian Act. And that's what we're trying to get beyond. Because it broke down our nations, it broke down our clan mothers, it broke down our hereditary chiefs, it broke down our societies, it broke down our whole system of governing and imposed a 2-year elective system. That's what it did. And so now we have a Okima Khan, Indian Act chief, our Ogimao. Long ago we had Okimao. Now because of the Indian Act, Okima Khan, Okima Khan, Indian Act chiefs. Difference. But it's that Indian Act that imposed that. And that Indian Act controls everything from our lives. You couldn't leave the reserve without a pass permit till 1951. Couldn't have access to a legal lawyer till 1951. Controlled everything. The Indian Act. And it's still here. So now, after that Indian Act was there, and I just applied it back home. Saskatchewan joins Confederation in 1905. Same with Alberta. Important to remember that. Then in 1930, the Natural Resources Transfer Agreement. Federal government gave to the provinces of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, all the natural resources control in their provincial boundaries. It's got to be challenged. Doesn't respect our treaty principles. And I put this in here. Offloading. Federal government offloaded to the little provinces, all provinces, education monies, healthcare monies, and social services. 1960-61. So you're in Edmonton now. You get your Alberta card or whatever, you go to the hospital. It's because of that. Remember when we used to have Indian hospitals just for Indians? I do, because I was born at the Fort Capel Indian Hospital. We saw that as a recognition of that treaty right to health care. So this was offloaded. So whether now you're from Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, or wherever, Ontario, Quebec, they get billions of dollars for education, healthcare, social services. Offloaded. So that's a big issue too. So how do you develop relationships with your provincial governments and provincial premiers now? You got a new premier here, Premier Kenney. What kind of relationship will the 47 First Nations have with him from Treaty 6, 7, and 8, Alberta? He gets a lot of money for education, healthcare, social services. You've got to sit down and talk. Nobody's going anywhere. Working out jurisdiction. Got to sit down and talk. 60, 61. 75. Modern day treaty processes. James Bay, Quebec Self-Government Agreement, 75. Then you also had subsequent modern day treaties, they call them. Right from Sechelt to Nisga'a to the 11 First Nations in the Yukon that have these modern self-government agreements, which are outside the Indian Act. But again, we put that there to show there's differences, because from 1975 on, Crown here in Canada, we've got our international treaties. But even on Treaty Day, in our treaty back home, it says, at a place or places designated, you will meet with representatives of the Crown to receive your annuity payments, discuss all aspects of the treaty. So that land at Fort Capel is our collective reserve by the Treaty 4 Tribes, Treaty 4 Nations. It's collectively owned by the Treaty 4 Tribes. And so we can learn from that, because now Treaty 1 is starting to get organized with the Kapyong Barracks in Winnipeg, another collectively held reserve. Maybe 100 Wellington, for the 11 Algonquin nations and tribes in Ottawa. Because in Saskatchewan, we got over 54 urban reserves, another 50 on the way. Why is it only urban reserves there? Go to Regina, there's Piapot right in the middle of Regina, Cowassis on the east side, Sakamay on the west side, Gordon's is around. Like, we got urban reserves all over. It's a good thing. How come they're not in Ontario? How come they're not in Manitoba? How come they're not in Alberta? Urban reserves. Makes you go, But we got lots in Saskatchewan. And so we can learn urban reserves, collectively held reserves, all the time. But the modern Treaty Day processes for the James Bay Cree, they've got an agreement. They're outside the Indian Act. They decided. It's not up to us to say it's good or bad. They decided. So they're moving along. And then, of course, 1982, Section 35, Constitution was patriated. And Section 35, existing Aboriginal treaty rights are recognized and affirmed. Full box of rights or empty box of rights. 1982. So now it's the Crown and right of Canada because of that. But remember, as treaty people, we went to Great Britain. And Lord Denning came through with his decision. Because we were scared as treaty Indians that, whoa, we're breaking our treaties. You're domesticating them by putting them in Canada's domestic constitution in Section 35. You can argue it either way, a good thing, bad thing. But Lord Denning said, well, if that Crown is not honoring your treaties, according to Spirit, we leave the door open for you to come back. So there's avenues, that international aspect. And remember back to the numbered treaties, Alexander Morris, he was the Crown's treaty commissioner. John A. Macdonald said, hey, Alexander Morris, you're the Queen's commissioner, Crown's commissioner, you go out and make treaties with Indians, Indigenous peoples. And he did. Get the Alexander Morris's treaty book. Gives you a good understanding about what was talked about verbally and orally. You need that book to understand, but you also need our elders' history and oral interpretation of what went on. That's what you need to understand treaties. So now we talk about 2019. On Treaty Day now, does the Treaty Commissioner come out? No, you get an FSO from Indian Affairs with a stack of $5 bills and an RCMP member. That's what you get. And a stack of bullets too, 22 shells. I used to get all the 22 shells. The guys gave them to the best hunter at Black Bear. Bullets, 22 shells. All those things because of treaty. But where's our treaty commissioner? Where's our treaty tribunals? Whether they be national treaty commissioners or international treaty commissioners. Where's the policy framework for treaty implementation for the international treaties? Magi Iguay, there's nothing. So we need a lot of work to do. That's 1982, Section 35. And we've been winning because of Section 35 on the positive side. From Calder to Siwi to Sparrow to Delgamuuk to the latest one here with the Chilcotin because of Section 35. So if it wasn't there, you may not have won at the Supreme Court, a white man's court level, all those Supreme Court decisions. And it took a lot of time to go through that court process. But there's many victories because of Section 35. Existing Aboriginal and treaty rights are recognized and affirmed. Very important piece as well. 2016, UNDRIP, UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We've passed it in 2007. All the countries of the world endorsed it. How do you give it legal effect? How do you use free, prior, and informed consent? Move beyond duty to consult and accommodate. Look at those things now for anything regarding laws and policies or resource development. It is indeed the roadmap to reconciliation in Canada, is that UN Declaration. So it's got to work hand in hand with our treaty relationship with the Crown. It's got to work hand in hand with the RCAP Commission recommendations, the TRC recommendations, but use that as a tool, as a UN Declaration. Which is why Bill C-262 is important, the Private Members Bill, to give legal effect to the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. So delegates, I just wanted to get, the past is leading to these 4 policies now. Because these 4 policies in 2019, we're trying to set proper processes with the Crown so they don't go off on their own and develop things. They need a First Nations lens. They need First Nations to help guide the process. And all the speakers before me said, we don't agree with the June deadline for anything. We don't. We've got resolutions from our chiefs. We're respecting those resolutions. But we have to fix them because all those 4 policies are problematic and they have challenges and they don't respect Aboriginal rights and title or treaty rights. They're based on termination rights and title. So we got to fix that. That's what we're trying to do here. Get the 4 processes working, the tables through our chiefs committees, our working groups. But there's got to be working groups on each one of those policies. That's what we have to do. So on comp claims and inherent rights, Canada has refused for years to engage on the comp claims and inherent rights policies. Finally, they're starting to talk to us. Canada's focus has been on the recognition and implementation of the Indigenous Rights Framework. And we've said, we all want to get out of the Indian Act, but not by June of 2019. Not feasible, not going to happen. We all want a better policy, but not by June of 2019. We've already had a September meeting last year, and we had our December meeting, and our chiefs were clear. Slow it down, do it right, but don't rush it. But we've got to lead it. First Nations got to lead it. First Nations driven. That's how we're going to get beyond the Indian Act. And it's got to be a flexible approach. That's what we have to do. So the AFN does reject the framework process and the proposed outcome in that time frame. So now we've got to work with the Crown reps. So Minister Bennett will be here tomorrow. ADM Joe Wild's probably here. So I'm not going to talk about you behind your back, Joe. I'll talk about you up front like this. Where are you if you're here? We got to work with him. Joe is the one going around to all the different tribes, whether it's by reserve, by treaty areas, by nations, by tribal council, and the 70 tables that are there. Well, that's your call, you're right. You know, capacity building. It's your call, you're right to go down that road. But it's a process, and it's from that department, that ADM. That's how that is. And so tomorrow to ask them, process plan, how do you get engaged? We're following our chiefs in assembly direction. That's what we're doing. This is a working forum. Also want to say, we never had any input into the development of the plan. They just did that on their own. So if we want things to work, it's good to do things together. And we're trying to develop a process that would result in First Nations-led engagement and dialogue on these policies. That's what we're trying to do. It's one of the goals of this meeting here. The other thing is that we've made our position very clear that the timelines don't allow for meaningful engagement. So even ourselves have to utilize that test of free, prior, and informed consent as the Assembly of First Nations. I've said before, chiefs and delegates here, that we're trying to make our AFN more relevant to First Nations across Canada, more responsive to the issues, concerns, and needs that have been identified, and respectful of the diversity. Our AFN, that's what it's there for. It's an advocacy organization, and we lobby for policy and legislative change, and we lobby for investments every fiscal year in that federal budget. We lobby hard. So when you look at it, last 4 fiscal years, $21.4 billion for Indian people, First Nations people in the budgeting process. That's unprecedented. 4 Kelowna Accords. But I always say this, that progress doesn't mean parity. There's still a huge gap in the quality of life. So we still need investments in housing, in education, in healthcare, deal with the mental youth suicide crisis in our territories, deal with the disproportionate number of people in jails, too many of our people in the child welfare. The list will go on and on. So yeah, $21.4 billion sounds like a lot of money, and it is unprecedented. 4 Kelowna Accords, but we're not done yet. So keep it moving. Even the wiping out of the loans in BC, the 1.4 billion in loans. Took a little bit of lobbying, so with the work of Grand Chief Ed John, myself, and others, make it an issue, make it a priority. Wiped them out. And the ones that prepaid them, you get reimbursed. So that's pretty good. Money back in First Nations territories. Had to lobby and advocate for that. Every year, Bill Morneau. In Cree, we call him Sunyao Gimao. He's the big money chief. He's the Minister of Finance. Because he's the one that decides what Seamus O'Regan gets in ISK, what Carolyn Bennett gets in Crown Relations. He's the one that decides what Ralph Goodell gets for policing, what Patty Haidu gets for ISETS training and skills. He's the one that decides that. So we've got to work and keep influencing that process. Oh, you went ahead already. Okay. I was going to wait. Before getting to this one, additions to reserve. This is another one. ATR process. So slow. Takes a long time. Third-party interests now are starting to supersede your rights as First Nations people. Third-party interests. I'm just going to put this on because I might drop it. So, additions to reserve policy needs to be updated. There's no question. ATR. And we've got resolution from our Chiefs and Assembly as well to update and work towards a better process, a quicker process for additions to reserve. But third-party interests are what slows it down. Because if you've ever been to reserve creation, it takes a long time because you got to deal with a provincial canvas, provincial government canvas, you got to deal with department by department, you got to deal with third-party interests, you got to satisfy all those things. You got to have an MSA, a municipal servicing agreement with the town or whatever for sewer and water and everything. It's a cumbersome process. Takes time for reserve creation. So can we find a speedier way to get it done? Reservations. So we're going to look at that, ATR. Spec claims, the last one, the 4 policies. And we have been working with Crown Indigenous Relations to look for a fully independent specific claims process. We don't want government, the Crown, to be judge and jury on deciding whether or not you have a legal, valid claim and then making the determination on what you should be getting. The independent claims process, we're even changing the name from comp claims, spec claims, maybe to land restoration or something different. Because a lot of our people say, why are we claiming our own land back? All these things, you got to try to find a way to fix. And that's what this forum is, to give some advice and guidance. 5-year reviews of justice at last happened. 2016, the Auditor General report on spec claims. And these reports demonstrate that what we've said all along, that Canada has failed to adequately carry out its lawful treaty obligations. There's no question. Okay, we know that. Now what? We know all this. Now what? I always say, don't always point out problems and analyze things. What's the next steps to try to fix things? What's the options? What's the alternatives? What's next? What are we proposing as an option and alternative? That's what we're trying to get to. So all of these things, from comp claims to inherent right, to addition to reserve, to spec claims, they need fixing. That's what this is for. Now on this nation building, I just put this back up to the other one. And I applied it to myself. I'm a member of Little Black Bears First Nation. They call it Little Black Bears Band. Chief Clarence Bellegarde just got reelected, my cousin. He's been there many, many years. 4 new councillors. Well, not new. Holly's there. We have 3 on reserve, 1 off reserve. So Holly and Boris and Denise is back on, and off reserve we've got Bully, cousin Bully, Randall Bellegarde. So we have a chief and 4. 3 on reserve, 1 off reserve. We're under custom of the band. We have 3-year terms. Chief Clarence Bellegarde and Council represents all of our people at Little Black Bear, whether you live on the res or whether you're off. Remember the Corbier decision? Chiefs represent their people on and off. That's how it is. That's reality. That's just the way it is. So I always do it this way. The creator on top, the people. Back home, we elected our chief and council. 1 band, 1 First Nation there. Then Little Black Bear belongs to the File Hills Agency back home. Working with 5 reserves, Oconee, Star Blanket, Pipixis, Little Black Bear, and Carry Kettle, Nakota, Assiniboine Tribe Nation. Work on things like policing. We have our own standalone police agreement. Only one in Saskatchewan. Big issues with that. There's not enough resources to compare to RCMP, our city police. So that's an ongoing issue. Got our health clinic out there, but we work with the File Hills Agency. Then we belong to a tribal council. And there's 11 reserves that work there. Tribal council. And then we belong to the Federation, used to be Saskatchewan Indians, then they changed their name to the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. Little Black Bear's part of that, 74. And I always say it's the only united Indian First Nations political advocacy organization in Canada. It is. And because of that unity, it's been able to do things in Saskatchewan, like the First Nations University of Canada, like the Saskatchewan Indian Gaming Authority. Created 2,000 jobs in our casino business, cultural center. See, like it, because of that unity. But it's a regional from Saskatchewan, right? It's not by treaty areas, it's not by nation, but it's united. Assembly of First Nations on the bottom, 634 right across Canada. Advocacy organization. And I've always said, and I've been your national chief, and I'm a big honor, I say it's the best job in the world. Advocating for change. Advocating for our rights. I never wanted to say that Assembly of First Nations, historically, people say, oh, we don't need it. Assorted fruits and nuts, AFN. AFN, all for nothing. Don't hear that anymore. We're getting things done. 21.4 billion. Moving ahead on jurisdiction on child welfare, that's a big issue. 40,000 First Nations children in foster care. You need to get something to hit the provinces and territories to come to the table to respect your jurisdiction. That's what C-92 is. That's what it is. We dealt with the CHRT rulings already, discrimination. Pushed them on that already. Another one on languages, that's another big one. Language is so important for identity. Statutory funding. So we want to see C-91 passed, C-92 passed, and C-262 passed by the end of June. We've got 2 months. All trying to do that. Advocating for those things. Policy changes, legislative changes. It's what we're there for. And we're there to help open doors for chiefs. Chiefs, if you need a meeting with the minister, deputy minister, whatever it is, whether it be on your claim, more housing, better housing, we try to open doors for you. And we've done that quite a bit. Then, Little Black Bear entered as part of that Treaty 4 team, Treaty 4. And there's 35 First Nations, 35 Indian Act bands if you want. And there's Crees in there, there's Sotos, Ojibwe, Nakawe, Nishnabek peoples in there. There's Assiniboine, Nakota peoples. That's what it is, Treaty 4. So I was big on treaty areas coming together because I couldn't figure out, man, we always talk about the provinces coming after treaties, you know. We always talk about that, nationhood and jurisdiction and sovereignty and inherent right. Why do we organize by provincial boundaries then? Why do we do that? Treaty 4 goes into Manitoba and parts of Alberta. So we're going to take that back, Chiefs in Alberta. We're taking that. No, it's 75,000 square miles in Treaty 4. Are we structured by treaty areas? It's kind of coming. Treaty 1's getting organized. Treaty 2, Grand Council Treaty 3, Treaty Francis Kavanaugh. It's starting to move that way. But then a lot of times we're cut off by these boundaries. Cookby, you're from BC Indian. You're a BC First Nations chief. Cookby Ron Ignace. He's from BC. Oh, chief, you're from Alberta. Yeah, Cookby Ron's got land in Alberta. That's the other issue, is overlapping territories of our nations and tribes. Overlapping claims. Big issue. Big issue. So somewhere in all this, so nation building, nationhood is the other piece we're going to talk about. And apply it to yourself. Some First Nations are doing it on their own, moving beyond the Indian Act on their own. I think of Chief Darcy Bear at Dakota Whitecap. Very progressive First Nations chief. moving beyond the Indian Act, they have a self-government process, doing that as one Dakota First Nation. We can't forget we also have collective rights. You have inherent rights, Aboriginals, but they're collective rights. So how do we move beyond the Indian Act? So nation building, we got to think and get rid of that mindset of that Indian Act. Because we have been colonialized and colonized to think our rights come from that Indian Act. Many of us think that. And I usually go to a room sometimes and I do a test. How many here Indians have treaty cards? Sometimes, man, a room of, oh, we got treaty cards. I got a treaty card. And I say, really? Show me your treaty card. And most times people will pull out a status card. And you get that status card. It's not a treaty card. It's a status card. And you get that status card because of what? Treaty? No. You get that status card back to that other thing. Back up. Who's the clicker? There. You get it because of that 1876 Indian Act. You get a status card because of that. And that Indian Act could be done away tomorrow. Does that mean our treaties are done? Does that mean our Aboriginal rights and title and jurisdiction are done? No. So we have a lot of work to do. No question. We have to work together, listen to each other, be respectful, because one size will not fit all. We have to respect what works in one territory may not work in another one. But it's up to the people to decide, and their chiefs and their leadership to decide. So, my friends and relatives, I wanted to share that much about these 4 policies and about this concept of nation building and moving beyond the Indian Act. Because once we do that, there's another important piece of work that's not on today's agenda or tomorrow, but working towards a new fiscal relationship with the Crown. That's a big piece of work. And I know Chief Lee Crowchild's on that committee. And there's 5 elements there we're trying to work on. Total population on and off the reserve, that relationship has to keep up with CPI, consumer price indexing, inflation, based it on need, treaty-based funding, but more importantly, percentage of land and resources, GDP. Because as First Nations people, we can never let ourselves, our children, grandchildren, or even our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters forget how much land and resources we're sharing. Because our treaty relationship was all about peaceful coexistence and mutual respect. But Canada's up here 6th quality of life. Indigenous peoples were 63rd. So we have to keep working for better ways, investments in education, housing, water, infrastructure, healthcare to close this gap. And that's the work of that fiscal table. So, friends and relatives, colleagues, those are my thoughts this morning to the team that's organized this. Thank you so much. And to everybody that's coming, our relatives that are outside, like we want to listen, respectful, include everybody as best we can, because we have a lot of work to do in 2 months. End of June, it's done. This current Liberal government's done. They rise, it's done. Big election in October. All I'm going to encourage is Indians, First Nations people, get out and vote. See who has the best policy, who has the best platform regarding First Nations people. We had 64% voter turnout last time in 2015. We flipped 22 ridings. And I voted for the very first time in my life. I don't feel any less Cree. I don't feel any less a member of Little Black Bear. So let's go out and use that, because if you want to be a member of Parliament, our Prime Minister, you better listen to Indians, First Nations people, because our vote matters, and we're getting more First Nations people in all parties. Infiltrate from within. Anyway, have a super 2 days, guys. Thanks so much.
Miigwech National Chief, very, very good words. I think to sum it all up, it's act Indian, not Indian act. So now that takes us to a health break. Wonderful Treaty 6 weather outside. We can go and enjoy the nice snow that decided to fall on the land. covered it up. It's all white. I don't know how to feel about that, but we we can go out and enjoy the weather. We're gonna be back 15 minutes, so grab a coffee, say hello to your relative you haven't seen in a while, and we'll be back in 15 minutes. Miigwech.
Wanna be next to you, know where I belong. I'm coming home. Hey, you know I'm coming home. Ain't gone too long, you know I'm coming home. Crowded street, familiar face. Our mind plays tricks. What a cat place. When missing you is all I know. I know it's time for me to go. Gonna come back home. Oh, baby, you know I'm coming home. Wanna be next to you, know where I belong. I'm coming home. Hey, you know I'm coming home. Ain't gone too long, you know I'm coming home. Oh, baby, all the phone calls and photographs, no, they just don't get me there. And memories aren't strong enough, oh, they just can't reach me here. Gotta leave it, gotta leave this. Another day, closer to the time. I'm coming home. Oh, baby, you know I'm coming home. Wanna be next to you, know where I belong. I'm coming home. Hey, you know I'm coming home. Ain't gone too long, you know I'm coming home. Gonna come back home. Oh, baby, you know I'm coming home. Wanna be next to you, know where I belong. I'm coming home. Hey, you know I'm coming home. Ain't gone too long, you know I'm coming home. I've been gone so long.
Holy man, thought I could depend on you. Guess I misunderstood your view or deny the answers that we seek. But I am tired of turning the other cheek. I do not offend, not offended by him, your Christ, your Savior, but by your church sin and all it's come to represent. They said undress, confess, repent, but that's just a way to circumvent the truth again. Yet 100 million already gone, and still it continues on, and that's just human body count, does not account for Earth. Birth is how we people survive here, 60% under 25 years, and you'd better believe that we're growing up strong. Our grandchildren will know long after we're gone that our bodies are drum and our spirit is song. Yes, our bodies are drum and our spirit is song. The vibration is life and goes on and on and on. Our bodies are drum and our spirit is song. So tell your stories, his stories, to someone else. Save your words to save the souls of yourselves. We cannot be perverted, diverted, converted, or blessed. We will find our truth when sun sets in the west, and the great mystery reveals herself to me. I'll plant my wishes on stars and my hopes in the sea. Like salmon to river, we're swimming upstream. My people never forgot how to dream. Like salmon to river, we're swimming upstream. The church, the institution, spawns revolution. The weakness is the strength of her pollution. The water is healing, the children's solution. The roots hold the soil, and the soil holds the tree. And the rings of her trunk circle our story. We are redwood, we are hardwood, only swayed by the breeze. Breath, my creator, is the breath in me. Oh, breath, my creator, is the breath in me.
This shame. I have a conscience, so I have to take the blame. I stood back, I watched it all. I even helped imprison you behind those walls. No excuse is good enough. We never let you speak unless you mimicked us. I can't run, I can't hide. Why, I can't even look you in the eye. No hollow prayer, no silent shout. No more empty words spilling from my mouth. You stripped away life in disguise. All that I can do is say I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought that God was on my side, and with my righteousness I'd tame the savage child. I would not have them running free. If they assimilate, they could be like me. How many can the wagons hold? Another 1,000 children, I suppose. It must have seen the judgment day, the anguish as the wagons rolled away. I can't begin to know your pain. survive. All that I can do is say I'm sorry. I apologize. No hollow prayer, no silent shout, no more empty words spilling from my mouth. You stripped away lights in the skies. All that I can do is say I'm sorry, choking on the words that say I'm sorry. I apologize. I apologize.
To former students of Indian residential schools. The treatment of children in Indian residential schools is a sad chapter in our history. Two primary objectives of the residential school system were to remove and isolate children from the influence of their home, families, traditions, and cultures, and to assimilate them into the dominant culture.
Hey, old man, can you hear me? 'Cause I've got something I need to ask. It's something that really makes me angry. It's something that I need to get off my chest. Why are all people so mistreated? Why do they lay us down like that? And why take them from the families and place them in them residential camps? In the name of God, they beat them. But tell me, man, where's God in that? And he said, boy, I don't know the answers, but tell you what you can do with that. Oh, and he said, grab your feathers when you can, gather all your medicines, light them up, have a little faith, let the smoke carry your prayers away, yeah. And then
Well, some former students have spoken positively about their experiences at residential schools. These stories are far overshadowed by tragic accounts of the emotional, physical abuse and neglect of helpless children.
excuse me, Father, will you see me? 'Cause I've got something I must confess. You're something that really makes me angry. You're something that I need to get off my chest. Why are my people so mistreated? And why do they lay me down like that? And why rip me from a family and place me in that residential camp? In the name of God, said, boy, I don't know the answers, but God had nothing to do with that. Oh, and he said, grab your good book when you can, recite our Father now and then. Oh, Hail Mary, full of grace, bless you, child, in Jesus' name.
It has taken extraordinary courage for the thousands of survivors that have come forward to speak publicly about the abuse they suffered. It is a testament to their resilience as individuals and to the strengths of their cultures.
Excuse me, God, can you hear me? 'Cause I've got something I need to ask.
In my neighborhood, next door the kids are crying and they're out on the lawn again. They're all alone, they're waiting for their mom and dad. No one that young should be looking so sad. Who's gonna hold those babies? Who's gonna spark a light in their eyes? Who's gonna lead them to their glory? Who's gonna hold them tonight? Late night on a bus in my neighborhood, an old man is wakened by a scuffle across the aisle. There's a boy with a bottle and a girl with a bruise. I know the story, who am I to accuse? Who's gonna hold them? They're just babies. Who's gonna spark a light in their eyes?
Good morning. Hello. Tanse, bonjour. I didn't get a chance to introduce myself. My name is Tim Katchue. I am from the Skownan First Nation in Treaty 2 territory, which happens to be in the middle of Manitoba right now. I am the Master of Ceremonies for this proceeding, this forum. I've been chairing events for quite some time now, so I'm quite familiar with the process on these sorts of forums. Very happy to be here, happy to be welcomed into the territory. We are going to be changing the agenda a little bit to accommodate some of our citizens who are gathered. They're outside currently, they're going to be coming in, and they have a prepared statement that they will be making, and the agenda has changed a little bit to accommodate that. They're going to be coming in with a few elders and, like I said, making a statement. So that's going to be happening in 10 minutes. So we have a little more time to greet our relatives that we haven't seen in a while. And in 10 minutes, we'll be hearing a statement from some of our First Nation citizens from across Turtle Island. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes. So, miigwech.
Who's gonna hold them tonight? Show me a way, a part I can play. Help me shine a light. standing there all night. The snow is falling down, she's shivering, and no one's driving around. She must have been there 12 hours by now. Who's gonna hold her like a baby? Who's gonna see the light in her eyes? Who's gonna show her that she's much more than this? Oh, who's gonna hold her tonight? Somebody hold those babies tonight. I wish I could hold them tonight.
I remember the years they took all the children and they locked them away. There they taught them to pray. There were children each night who were quietly crying. They are in the walls and the halls of my mind. How many little souls that surely were dying, and they'll bury so deep all the shame that they keep. They will all be alone in their garden of Eden, alone in the walls and the halls of their mind. Oh, he cried to his father, please come help free. Now he longs to be free of the wounds you can't see, and he tires of those demons that keep him from sleeping. Alone in the walls and the halls of his mind. He tries to be a father for his wife and his children, and he hides the pain that drives him insane. And that voice each night still quietly crying. Somewhere in the walls and the halls of his mind. Now he's back 40 years to confront all his fears. Reaches down in that hole to the pain in his soul. Now he knows his child who's been quietly crying. All alone in the walls and the halls of his mind. I remember the years your voices each night, still quietly crying. Somewhere in the walls and the halls of your mind. Somewhere in the walls and the halls of your mind. My graves, their bones cry out. Don't let what happened to us be forgotten. Indian hunters were paid for each scale by the government. You have nothing to be proud of, my white friends. It's your world. It's your world. And if ever there was a perfect crime, if ever there was a perfect crime, I grew up in an empty room, in a foster house full of strangers. Every dream I had about going home never ever did come true. You lie broken like the promises that litter every street and every alley in your world. And if ever there was a perfect crime, if ever there was a perfect crime, from ourselves we hide. From the darkness deep inside, you took away our pride, and you never know what you Someone please bring me home. Can't seem to do it on my the streets where I don't belong. Love to come back home to you, but I'm not that strong. So please, please bring me home. Someone please bring me home. Remember when all I wanted was to get away from you, but now I'd give my final breath to be back home with you. Give me the strength and voice to call out my plea, so that you, all my relations, can come and rescue me. Oh, won't you please, please bring me home.
Good morning. So the delegation that's going to be making a presentation shortly is not quite ready, but we are. So we have an agenda. We have a presentation on affirming treaty rights and inherent rights, title and jurisdiction by Mr. Roger Jones. Is Roger in the room? Roger is in the room. So we will start Roger's presentation, and when the delegation comes, we will pause and allow them to make their presentation. So clicker. Good.
Right.
All right.
Ani, menogishep, miigwachkenin deket giname wat ngamwen, menosh miigwach denak mampia on dadzijik gidniguing mampi win kweshkadadi. Good morning, chiefs, delegates. My job is to present some information which presents some foundational information that will help inform the discussion for the rest of the day and tomorrow. And there is a PowerPoint which has been prepared for this purpose, and that's what I propose to go through. And the PowerPoint really is in kind of two parts, both of which relate to what's happened in the past, and both from a long time ago, but also the more recent past over the last 12 months or so. And that's important because this discussion isn't the first discussion, and this discussion is not taking place in a vacuum. It follows some other important discussions that have already taken place, and all of that information is relevant for the discussion today and tomorrow. So, with respect to the background, I think one thing that obviously is important for all of us to embrace is the fact that we have responsibilities to the lands and the waters, and those are important responsibilities that we need to be able to manage. And managing those responsibilities requires the fullest capacity and ability on our part to do so, which includes being able to implement our rights, implement our sovereignty, and implement the lawmaking responsibilities that we have. The effort to to secure the cooperation and the accommodation from the government for the exercise of our rights and responsibilities is something which has been in the works for decades.
Migotch. Okay, as we can see, we have a delegation who've made their way to the stage. We'll be making a presentation. We have AFN Elder Mike Mitchell, who's going to be giving some context and some words. So I turn the mic over to Mike Mitchell.
Sir, this morning, when I spoke, I said, in a quest and discussions on self-government, nation building, there's going to be differences amongst ourselves from time to time. In our communities, regional and national, because we're not all going to hear each other's viewpoints. And this morning, there's a group that had a different point of view. They're outside protesting. And they asked to come in and present their view, their concern. We said, let them come in. We can't shut the door on each other. We have to be able to listen to one another, hear each other. And so they've asked for the opportunity to address the assembly. Tobacco was shared. We're going to talk to each other in a good way. So I am asking the assembly to break from your regular session and hear them out. And when they're done, they'll go back to their business and you'll go back to yours. So they have speakers that are going to speak on behalf of their group. So I ask you all to listen, have a good mind, and hear them out. Tony Gamona.
Thank you very much, Elder Mitchell. I believe we have Elder at microphone number 2 who has a statement. So if we can go to microphone 2. Chief Henry Lewis from Onion Lake.
Pitamago tao ino. Nipngagis mo to, nos kagiskag. Mamomo nip maya tipamato isinog. E kohtse, utakap ni poyak. Muini na notso, ni tugi mga kaut pihtuya kut muini na notso. Tay sinim na no kay witimik. E motista moja kung taasim sinanak. Inanas ko moja, e pintong na magoya. Kapampito ko yakot. I'd like to acknowledge the assembly, giving thanks to the Creator first of all, foremost. It is not us that we are thinking about my fellow chiefs as we walk through those doors. It is our children, our grassroots people that are crying out there. That's who we represent. The elders had met and wanted to read a statement in our God-given language. Therefore, I'm going to introduce my father-in-law, youngest brother, Clarence Woodstone. He will read this statement in our language. Thank you, Assembly, for allowing us. With all my heart, I thank you.
Hey, Nigan. Tatamskat na. Kutawe noche, wihone. Ewa, inte heoch. First of all, I greet you all in the name of our Creator and from my heart. I will read this document in my gift of language. Then the Creator will hear me, the Spirit will hear me, my ancestors will hear me. When our forefathers and foregrandmothers signed treaty, they spoke with our gift of language. Didn't use a borrowed language. And I'm representing Enoch of this great Turtle Island. For as long as the sun shines, the river flows, and the grass grows. Please allow me. Iwihtama, nignabams, kiwaganabam guamota, minstik. Nianan, pamoganak. Egoski chuinok. Igimamo pa yauta. Miskutiwaskaigan o takse. Yakasena ma, nohom nanak, egonamusum nanak, ogotawan wawa. Ogo chemantane ma, sky, egogachas gani tauchik. Kihtiak, eto itagik, tanskais pamingo awa, mstroso. Kakwepigo na sota matuna, egogigway, kagia sumigoya. Niananas kihchuinuak, utamenstik, tapo napchita, ni pixkonan, egogitsip matson, uge mantrema, duskaim nanak, egoge gaches wagani taukchik. Ngakamemonan, kanakatogya, tanches paminswa, Ntuesona, egonne oma mustigaona, kakas potamoya akoge, uskayak, egogach kanitauchik. Entsiminama, igispakten gosjauta, ngawi anaski, uiawe, egogiswago agahiogiwe. Nsigimananak, uniganistamagio, kanakatoge chingtaskinan, ntinim nana, nigoge, uskaek, egachas waganitauchik. Eksen tepemonan, kamamoatpaskea, kamtsimnama, dipmatson. Tapon, tapatsihtanan, uhucha satamatuna, ega sumiguson. Ngagamapatihtanan, isihtauna, wesuona, egone pixkonan. Kamamoitas kemtoja. Ogi minagi petakaski etsukotam stogoswak. Egonik minda. Goitas kemanan, goitatos kemanan. Emtsimnama. Iswagotoja. Eswagotaigua ama sotamatuon, suiten wagotenan, osamo otra sotamatone wagotaigua. Emtsimilama asumigoson, ego sotamatona. Ogo tsega penoksik, Ega spota katakuhtitsik. Ei vihtamaa, niin anomen taskinaan, niin an kapamensonan. Sko, pisem katsaagasoit, sipia kapnitsoage. Maskosia, kupigige. Example na naskomtagok. Kina naskomtnaan tuo toik. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Have a good meeting.
May go ahead, Elder. Thank you for those words, very well articulated. Our people are very good orators. Sorry?
They didn't read the English version of
Yeah,
it.
no.
Henry could.
Yep. So that was obviously in Nehao language, and I believe there is a translation for us.
Ask Chief Henry to read out the English version.
So there is going to be the translation in English for those of us not worthy of being able to speak Cree. Microphone 2, please.
Testing. Statement on rights. We, the treaty and sovereign title holders of our nations, have gathered in Meskwachis, Waskegane, on April 29, 2019, to maintain the sacred fire of our ancestors for all future generations. The elders firmly rejected the federal government's colonial agenda that violates our international treaty relationship and seeks to terminate our inherent rights through legislation and policy changes developed without our free, prior, and informed consent. We, the original peoples of Turtle Island, uphold our truth, our languages, and sacred responsibilities, protection, prevention, intervention, direction, and connection to our peoples and our lands. We continue to carry the responsibility to protect and live our sovereignty, jurisdiction, laws, and legal orders of our governing lodges so that they are transferred into the hands of the next generations for the circle of life to continue. We hold in reverence all that Mother Earth gives to us, including our responsibility to maintain balanced and harmonious relationship with all forms of life, now and continually. We direct our elders, our leaders, to make decisions protecting our nations, people, children, and future generations, now and continually. Therefore, we agree and commit ourselves to respectfully work together, sustaining our jurisdiction through speaking the truth about our inherent connection to our land and our treaties, carrying on our ceremonies, our laws, and speaking our languages, living in good relationship with our families, clans, nations, our treaties with the Crown, and all of the creation, upholding our international treaty relations, and upholding the inherent and treaty responsibilities for our future generations, confirming our right of self-determination. Thank you.
We had speakers, so because that'll happen if you don't get our speakers. It was Chief Henry, myself, and one other. So you have to ask Chief Henry to speak. Me to intervene and just say that, because I can't intervene on that.
That's all right, I'll let them finish.
Okay. Henry's got to speak, otherwise they're gonna go carry on.
Thank you very much for So I understand that there is an elder that is going to be speaking.
It's the chief. Chief Henry. Chief Henry speaking.
Yeah. Microphone 2.
I am with Treaty 6, and I am fighting for our right. And I am the clan grandmother, and I am proud to be a clan grandmother. To fight for our rights, a rightful right, and we have that right. And the Canadian government hasn't got any right to. The Canadian government does not have no jurisdiction over our rights. And I got proof in my hands. And our leader here, Beauregard, has the medallion hanging on his neck. Anybody that has that medallion goes with this bargain that was hidden from the native people. It was hidden for years. It took me 5 years to find the bargain that is actually ours, our right, and it is the bargain that the Queen had made with the native people, not with anybody else. It was the rights of the native people that I hold in my hands, and we got every right to fight for what is right. And our land is our land, and our land is not for sale. We have never shown a bill of sale for our land to nobody. And I know that every native standing here has never signed our land away from us. And our land is not for sale. The Canadian government figures that they can walk over us. Trudeau cannot walk over us or anybody else. We are the mother, the clan grandmother who speaks for my people, because I care for all of you, each and every one of you. The children that we have not seen yet, the unborn children, that is their right that we're fighting for. It is their right that our trees, it is their right, their rightful right for us to fight for them. For there'll be nobody after us. If we don't fight, we're going to be like sitting in the Sahara Desert. That's where we're going to be sitting with no trees, no water, no animals, and nothing to live on. We're going to be depending on the white stores to feed us. And how many of us are educated? How many of us have money to go to the stores to go and get our food? How many of our people are living in a third world country, eating out of the garbage can for crying out loud, eating out of garbage dumps? Where on earth is those treaties that reconciliation that government is talking about so badly? There is no reconciliation because they don't even know where it started. How can they reconcile when they haven't even got anything to reconcile with us for? They haven't even consulted any of us. None. They stole our land. They stole our identity. At one time, the Queen herself, Queen Victoria, said This land is yours. This land is ours. You cannot dispute it. She is not our queen. She is our sister. She told us this land is yours, and I will not take it away from you. That's what she told us. So therefore, this land is ours. I expect to make copies of this bargain, and each and every one of us. It is our rightful right. It is not under the Canadian Constitution. We are our own bosses. And let it be known. Our land is not for sale. Neither are our 4 children that are not born yet. Thank you very much.
Miigwech. Thank you very much, Elder Miigwech. We have Elder AFN resident Elder Mike Mitchell going to be making some comments.
Yokarani gawana. Doske. Gawana. Na wa tsaya da gwe ni. Dana ne se gwe adiso. Teni yiju wada kwa gwe. Ne ne kaya da gwe ni. Everything that we have heard is true. Everything that you have said was said this morning as well. You have to remember, the more distance is created amongst ourselves, we are further and further apart. I want to share with you the same words of concern were expressed this morning. It's going to depend how far we wish to carry your thoughts. You express concern over our children, right down to all our nations. Well, that same feeling was expressed this morning by these chiefs. So now we have to discuss everything that you have said and that was said this morning. That's a direction that we need to go. This isn't what you call an AFN Chiefs meeting. This is a meeting where we get a chance to sit down, share thoughts with one another. And that's what you have done. You've articulated your concern. Now, the chiefs are going to have to discuss this afternoon and for the rest of tomorrow. You need to be comforted to know they're not in favor of what Canada is offering. You're not in favor of rushing anything through down our throats. So you have to build some trust among each other that we're going to go in the same direction. So I want to thank each and every one of you that came, because sometimes it's necessary to hear what they call from the grassroots, from peoples. And I'll tell you some of the things that have been said in all our communities, nation communities across this country, when they speak to their leaders and they refer to them as Indianak chiefs, they refer to them as the ones that are out there. They're going to take all the hits if they sell us out. That's not going to happen. And the more we get educated about our nation identity, our cultural and spiritual value, to remain as to who we are as Oklahoma. That's why we came here to this meeting, to learn and share with one another. What you had to say is an important element to add to what we're discussing. So I want to thank each and every one of you for contributing to that and sharing your concern. But don't put each other down. We're going the same way. We might not agree on everything, but the more we hear each other, it's comforting to know what our concerns are and where we need to go from here on. I want to share with you tomorrow and in future meetings when they discuss this, they have gotten a lot more education from hearing you, what you have to say. I want to thank your elders, your chief that gave this talk today, because we need to hear that. We need to hear from the grassroots level of people. Because the concern, you also need to hear from what the leaders are trying to put together, what their position will be to Canada. If there's need for more meetings in the future, if there needs to be any opposition whatsoever, there will be opportunity in the future after you hear what they have been able to put together as our position. And it's going to be hard because there's going to be extreme positions, there's going to be the middle of the road, and there's going to be others that's going to say, the self-government that Canada's offering sounds pretty good. I'm rather small, I'll take that. We need to listen to one another, share our thoughts, educating one another to be nation people. After 2 centuries of Indian Act, after hundreds of years of residential school, we have to learn to be patient with one another. We have to be willing to educate one another, see ourselves as brothers and sisters. So pushing each other down is not the way to go. Right across this North America, you listen to the news, what's going on in the United States, what they call Trumpism. Racial problems are creeping up into Canada, stemming from there. All we got left is one another. All we got left to fight for is our children. And that respect for our elders and leaders, we have to put it back together and go in the same direction. We're going to break for lunch. And before we do, I'd like to thank everyone. Because this morning, when we heard there's going to be people out there, we thought the best way, rather than continue to be apart, come in, tell us what's on your mind. So thank you very much. Now we go.
There's two more speakers. 2 more chiefs to speak.
Okay.
Okay. Miigwech, thank you very much, Elder. Okay. I hear you. There's speakers. Chief Lewis. Chief, yeah, microphone number 2, please. Chief Lewis, number 2, please.
Again, first of all, my deepest gratitude from Manila Cree Nation for giving the opportunity to address the Assembly. What I heard from the elder from AFN really lifted my spirits. Duty to consult in all the things that had been happening at the international level, we had reached their attention. We had made a submission, 4 nations, Shatina, Manila Cree Nation, Erminskin, Ochis. We had made an urgent action complaint to the UN. And then Canada were given an opportunity to tell their side of the story, how we are being treated here in Canada. April 14th, April 8th was the deadline that they were supposed to respond. We haven't heard anything about that response. But if you want to know, ask the government, ask Trudeau or ask Minister Bennett. But while I'm on here, I want to, this is just like a reenactment for my part. I can allude to how Big Bear felt when he fought for his people, how the government viewed him as a renegade chief. And that's the way I viewed myself too, which I'm not. I'm humble, but I do believe in my ceremonies. I am a lost keeper, and that's where I'm coming from. This morning when I got up, first thing I went out there in the snow, cried to the Creator, put some tobacco on Mother Earth, so that we will prevail as treaty nations of Turtle Island. I ask the Creator to view us as one campfire across this Indian land of ours. But with that, I'd like to again acknowledge and thank AFN for giving us this opportunity. I have been traveling far and near, fighting for unity, which is pretty hard to accomplish. We had created an alliance from the east and all the way to the west coast. And you can see some of them standing here. We will never quit till we are heard. We will never quit. And I know we will prevail one time in the future.
Very good. I understand there's another speaker.
One of them, and then there's another one.
From microphone 2?
No, there's one speaker after me, but I'm not sure who it is. But I know I'm speaking on the list. There's 3 of us.
So you're going to speak from microphone 2?
No, right here.
Oh, you're going to speak from here? Oh, okay.
Waikwakwai Cookby Judy Wilson, Skachinte Sequapim Ulu. I'd just like to thank, first of all, the pipe ceremony this morning, which was held just down the road here. All of our spiritual people and our knowledge keepers and our elders and our language speakers held the sacred pipe. They've been doing that almost every day because of the messages they're carrying in the elder statement. The elders took 2 days to draft that. But in recognition of that elder statement, it's very high level because that's what our elders and our ancestors have told us. That's the covenants that we have to hold from the Creator's teachings. So I want to thank, the ones that worked on it. They worked really, really hard. And it's been difficult because as your AFN elder is saying, we can't be divided. No, we can't. But you know who's dividing us is the federal government. They started this back in 1969 with the white paper policy, the white paper. And then 50 years later now, here we are, further divided because Canada continues its legislation and policies that are genocide to our people. They're still not listening. They talked about reconciliation on February 14th last year. It's far from reconciliation because it's not honoring the sacred treaties. It's not honoring our inherent title and rights. It's not honoring the path that our people and our ancestors told us to walk on. So the people that came here, I said I would walk with them because what the message they're carrying here to the AFN Assembly, which is supposed to have been the People's Assembly. We can't ever bar our people out. So whoever made that decision finally not to bar our people out, thank you. Because once you start barring your own people out from your own institutions, then we're continuing that divide. The only unity is going to come is if we're going to listen to each other. And that statement's going to be really important in the deliberations over the next 2 days because the people are saying that this is too rushed, that is not co-development. This is the farthest thing from co-development. We've been calling for co-development in specific claims, and it has been far from that the last few years. They're not listening, they're implementing their own, and we haven't even had all the proper information. So that is not free, prior, informed consent. I've been trying to do presentations on this information, and I think it was Dr. Cookby Ron was the only one left in that BCAFN that from our nation that heard that. So that's not enough. Our chiefs have many things that are on their plates, yes. But this is one of the critical ones because Trudeau is saying he ordered ADM Joe Wild, I don't know if Joe Wild spoke earlier, but he ordered him to repeal the comprehensive claims and the inherent right to self-government by June. That's unilateral. That's not with any of our chiefs sitting here in the room. That's not with any of our elders or our people across Canada. He made that decision himself. And he has to be accountable for that decision, that unilateral decision he's making himself. It's not co-development and it's not reconciliation. And then also the other thing he's doing, he's saying he's going to have a directive in place in the meantime to direct negotiators. Did anybody have input into that? No. They're also saying they're going to have a new federal rights-based policy to replace those other policies without even having these discussions prior, without even having our people informed. Our people need to inform the chiefs, and our elders need to inform the chiefs to which path we're going to go down. Because our ancestors, our elders, the leaders of the day in 1969 called it the termination paper. That's why there's nobody else made up that word. It's our older leaders that said that was a termination path. And then in the paper, the 50 years later, it's white paper 2.0. And we need our leadership to understand that because the agreements that are being signed have that language in there. I know, and I've reviewed some of our agreements, and they say the provincial laws will apply. They say federal laws will apply. Well, what about our Indigenous laws? They haven't made that space yet for our Indigenous laws, even though in the Canadian Constitution it says they have to. We need to lead with our Indigenous laws, our sacred treaties, our inherent title and rights. We need to lead with those. We can't allow Canada to domesticate this process that we're under like a fourth level of government. We're not the fourth level. I would like to see who thinks they're fourth level of government in here. We cannot allow that to happen because that's the federal notions that are being contemplated. I've been at different tables and I've heard what's being said, and there people are saying what's rightly so. And I know our committee, where's the regional chief? In our committee also we heard the same things. What our regional chief statements would be very much the same what the people are saying here, because I'm on that committee and I heard the same things. And we have to be able to say, when our chiefs are up there, our national chief and our regional chiefs are there, they need to be taking those messages directly to the government. And we have to be clear about it. We have to be very clear we don't want to go down those termination paths. And there is problems with some of those policies that are in place right now. And we have to be able to say we don't want to be co-opted. We don't want to have that co-development in that way that they're leading us down those paths. And I know at the UN, when we were at the UN, it was really important to be there because we had to do a number of interventions because Canada is saying everything is good here. Reconciliation is good for us, that they're co-developing things and they're working with us. But it is very far from the truth. And our people, they're gathered here today, and this is I just wanted to let the chiefs here at the Assembly of First Nations to know this is the start across Canada. This mobilization today is the start leading up to June, leading up to those elections. Because we have to make sure that people's voices are heard. We have to make sure that message gets to Trudeau. And he understands what path our people are going to walk on is the path of those ancestors that we walked on and all of the other leaders from 1969. And some of the ones that were around in 1969, you remember how those tables were. You can recall those hard discussions. But at the end, the people prevailed, and the people will prevail this time again. Cook's Jam.
Miigwech, Chief. Thank you very much for those those words. I understand that there's another speaker that, there was a third one, but we're not sure who the speaker is. Are we, oh, I see somebody approaching.
Yeah, there was one other, I just can't remember whose name was.
Miigwech.
I am the great grandson of Chief Geewan. We were commissioned, my great grandfather, by the chiefs to send word to the commissioner with Chief Sweetgrass. Because we heard there were people coming into our lands, surveying our lands. And then the commissioner came, and that what happened was Treaty 6. In those days, our people were free. We were migratory people. We lived off the land. That was our mainstay. Our buffalo was everything to us. They came when we were at our weakest, and they used sickness, and they used poverty, starvation. That was their type of negotiation. Today we are strong. We learned from the past. I asked the AFN not to speak for us. Our chiefs here are asking you not to speak for us. That is the message I carry here today. Let our chiefs speak for themselves. Invite them to your meeting as a treaty representative. Let them make their own minds. Let them say their words for their people. This is the message I present to you here today.
Exactly.
When we had our Treaty 6, it was a peace treaty. It was never a war treaty. We didn't fight a war. We were peaceful people. We were humble. We kept our promise to be peaceful people, and we will continue to do that. That's all I have to say today. Thank you very much.
Yeah! Woohoo! Yeah! Thank you very much. I just wanted to say we are the First Nations people since 1491, and we have to vote Pierre Elliott Trudeau's son by the name of Justin Trudeau out of office so that we could bring in the new government system is to stand up for what's right for our people, and all I got to say is, idle no more, idle no more, idle no more. Hashtag Black Snake Killer. Hashtag MNI Wikani. Hashtag idle no more, idle no more. Woohoo! Yeah!
We have another speaker, Chief.
One thing.
Chief is going to be making final comments.
Oh, I forgot to speak something. Okay,
Oh, Kakiota Tamskat now. First of all, I want to thank the people again for showing the support and for being there as the voice that we got to carry forward as chiefs. I too was in New York and I spoke about how nobody should be speaking for us but ourselves. I'm the chief of Alexander First Nation, and I believe that we've always been strong in our treaties. We've always been strong in maintaining and protecting those. And now in the last few years, I've seen changes as a chief on what the federal government is trying to push us down. I know we can't take that anymore. That's not who we are. We don't stand there and take that. I want to, thank our regional chief is sitting here, and I want to thank her for taking the message of our treaties forward. A lot of people don't know that, but she does do that for us. And that's important that somebody's there saying this. But again, I always say AFN does not speak for me as the chief. I've said it many times. I've said it to the national chief himself. I never gave my free, prior, informed consent for anybody to speak. So these laws that they're making, Alexander have sent their non-consent letters all the time. We will never consent to this. So we're part of the battle. We're part of the fight, and we'll maintain that. And along the road, I hope all of us are. It's like the word of the elder, talking about doing it together. I thank him for those words because it's important that all of Canada, the nations, the treaty people, the native people of this land, we all come together and put a fight forward. If we don't, we're going to be fighting each other, and that's not what the Creator ever wanted. And I got to commend him on that. I thank him very much. But going forward, let's not stop. Let's not stop the fight. Let's not stop the battle. We need you guys out there, the voices out there. We need you guys to help us as chiefs go forward. Without those people behind us, we're just a voice in the wind. And that's not what we want to be. So I thank you all, and I appreciate the Assembly for allowing us this time. And I thank you all for that. And again, we'll see each other in our travels. I just hope that when we do, we shake each other's hands and not be against each other. Hi, hi.
West. This is Dion Leon. You do not have his consent. You do not have the consent of the children from the Secwepemc Nation. You do not have the consent of the Kana'as and the Kia'as. Take a look at my grandson. Take a good look at him. This is whose rights you're signing away. Don't sell out his future. No consent. In our language, what we say is da'a. That means no. Da'a. No, 2.0. No, 2.0. No, 2.0. No, 2.0. No, 2.0. We will not accept your blood money. You do not speak for us. Shame.
Chimigwach to all the speakers who've made presentations this morning, very profound statements. It shows that Anishinaabe Indigenous people across Turtle Island have very diverging views on many things, and that's okay. I have a statement. It's not as profound, but lunch is being served. So we're breaking for lunch now. We will be back up at 1 o'clock. So Chimigwach for coming and sharing your perspectives.
So now, do you think what I went through, what our people went through, military pointing guns at us, rioters, police, and all that stuff, we are now going to sell out? No goddamn way. So please, be careful what you say. Okay? I am not a #1 fan of the AFN, but I will work with the AFN when it's necessary. And I'll make sure that nothing's going to happen that will allow somebody to have to stand up there with a baby saying, don't sell out, don't sell out. Because that's not what's happening, and that's not what's going to happen. One important thing I want to say, if you want to do something about what's going on, then what you do is you pass your own laws, you implement them, and you fight the government that way. Don't just argue about policy and all that stuff. Carol Bennett and what's his name, what's the other guy's name, Joe Wild, they can come here, they can say whatever they want. Forget about that. Go home, do what you have to do on the ground. That's what we do. And that's how you're going to beat them. Then that's what's going to happen. That's why we're here. And that's why I'm saying that's not going to happen. I have to keep repeating myself, but that is not going to happen as far as I'm concerned. Now, if I've insulted a few people, or if I've made some people angry, I apologize for that. But I get very emotional too. 40 years I've been involved in this, and I've seen a lot come and go, a lot of changes, and that's the reason why I'm here today. I came here to listen, to understand what was going on, and perhaps to give some advice, some direction, in order to help our cause, because it's all of us together, not separate.
Miigwech. All right. Sandwiches are in the hallway. Thank you very much. See you at 1 o'clock.